Welcome to another broadcast here at Ultimate Studios Inc. And today we'll talk about something very cool which is loved in the shred world. So 3-note per string ideas, sequences, and licks basically. And basically what this is 3 notes per string, scales, and sequences. So I did a video before explaining some basic exercises about how to get started with 3-note per string, and I'll just quickly show you what I did and I'll move on from that. So taking the major scale, I would just go right. So you would do groups of 6, always 3-note per string, and then you move to the next position and then go descending. So you put it all together, you get this long lick. And very important about all these type of licks is it's strictly alternate picking. So I'm not doing any economy or any weird down picking or 2 ups or any of that, right? It's just, there's no economy, no sweeping here. It's just strict alternate, right? Down, up, then up. And if you follow that, then certain licks will make sense because they're based on the picking. Now, if I take, let's say, the same G major lick, and I just want to practice a portion of it just to get that 3-note per string going. And I can make it longer by stacking all these 6s. You can do it anywhere, right? It's like I mean, it sounds very fast, but I mean, that's the whole point of all these runs, that they are fast, but you can still combine it with actual rhythm. So it's not just, hey, let's do it as fast as possible, and then you don't know what subdivision you're doing. So since it's 3-note per string, the normal tendency is to use a lot of triplets. So when you have a click going, right? Alright, so 1, 2, 3, 4, right? That would be 6 tuplets. So for example, let's take this exercise that I just did, and I'm going to do it even longer. So this whole portion, I'm going to add one group of 6 and combine it with the other one. So I'll get this. You can do it anywhere, right? In that same position, anywhere. Especially in the B string, you see your hand shift. That can also be moved all the way up the neck. So it's a very useful lick because it gives you a lot of mileage. Right? Now, if I do that in a very long run, I get this. So I'll play a little slower. I get. And then I shift up to the next position, and then here I go descending and I revert the lick. So put it all together, you get this. You can do that, in this case it's G major, but I can do it in A minor. I was playing a chord before, which was A minor. So I would move it to A minor, I would get this. And then so again, the long leg would be this. Again, strict alternate picking. I'm not doing any down downs, any up ups. It's just down up, down up, down up, right? Okay, so what else can I do with 3-4 strings? You can start taking little segments and making variations. So let's grab, this one is easy because it's up here. So I'll do it again in G major. I'm going to start from the E. So I go ascending 6, and then descending I'll go, which is diatonic thirds. That gives me 6 notes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, if I move it to the key I was doing before, A minor, I can do it up here. So let's hear how those couple of runs sound with the track. So this was very fast. It's I think I'm at 120. So that's pretty fast. But it gives me so much mileage, and I can do it anywhere. All right, and combine it with the other one. Now in the middle I did another lick, which is very cool, where you grab 6 notes, but you land on a note in the middle. And I do it diatonically all up the fretboard. You might say, oh, what if you land on another finger? It's like, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I'd land on the first finger. But I just like landing on the middle one because it sounds cooler to me. Because you got that half-step resolution. Whole step there. Whole step there. Half step there. Now, doesn't mean you always have to do it in triplets. If I play this on this track, I was actually doing 16 notes. All right, so you're grouping in 6, right? But you leave an 8th note rest. So you get a displacement of the phrase, which is kind of cool. That is one example. What about the other one I did before? Now let's see how that sounds up to speed. Now, one thing that I did there, because you can go all the way down if you take this idea I did before. Let's say you start up here, or you start anywhere, and you can go down those diatonic thirds all the way to the low strings. So you start, for example, you can start by doing the sixes. And then you go descending in thirds. So you do a sequence one way and then descending another way. I can move it or I can stay in the box. So slow, that would sound like this. Now, I have to admit, these are all tricky fingerings because there's nothing really symmetrical about it. So you really have to know your fingerboard and all your patterns. If you do 3-note per string patterns, there are actually 7 positions if you start on every note of the scale and go ascending. So if you go A minor, one starts here. The next one starts on the B, and so forth, right? The next one on C and D. So it's 7 positions, if you want to call it that, or patterns. Another way to group a lot of these long lines into something more usable, I like to do it mainly on 2 strings or 3, and if there's some sequencing involved, it actually makes it easier to identify the timing. So let's say if I stay in A minor, so I'm going up, and then here I go descending in groups of 4. It's pretty neat. And it would make perfect sense doing it in 16 notes. So if I do it here, here's 16 notes. Right? You can do that in any set of 2 strings. And then depending on where you start, it has a different flavor because all these notes, when played together fast, they create a tonality. It sounds very A minor. It can sound almost major. Or even here. Right? It doesn't really matter where you play it as long as you know what chord you're implying. But it's all in one key. So that's the fun part. It's like, hey, I can stay in one key. Another typical way of doing 3-note per string is when you do ascending or descending groups of 4. Right, that's another classic. Ascending. Now, for example, in this position itself, you got one tricky spot, which is, see, you have to bar 2 times. And you can maybe use other fingers. It really depends what you prefer, but it's a tricky spot. If I go one position lower, see, I got a bar again. If I go one position lower, there I have the bar. And the one thing that you can do with all these crazy positions is that you don't necessarily have to play it always in the grouping that that you're counting. Let's say, oh, I'm doing groups of 4. Oh, I have to play it at 16 notes every time. It's like, you don't have to. The cool thing is that you can grab the grouping and then maybe put it on a slower subdivision, let's say in case of triplets. So the triplets would be here. So I grab a group of 4 and then I'm doing triplets against it. Alright, same ascending. 3, 4. So you don't have to be stuck to say, oh my God, I'm always doing triplets and you know, I have to do triplets every time when I do this leg. It's like, no, as long as you understand how many notes you're doing in the grouping, you can apply that to different subdivisions and meters. All these runs can be done with picking or legato. There's no real rule once you start creating your own sound. In the beginning, you want to pick everything so you get a feel for the tempo and you synchronize. But that doesn't mean that you cannot legato all these runs. Or you do partial picking where you just pick here and there. So if I take the run in A minor, I'm not picking every note. If I would pick every note, it would be this. All right, if I do partial picking where I pick here and there, right, there's a difference in sound. So that's where your own style comes in. So you choose, hey, I want to pick this, or I want to legato it. Now you can also add certain accents. This one is also very famous. And you double up on that high note. All right. Now what I like to do with that lick is maybe change the high note and do it on 2 different pitches. That's not easy. You really have to get that second finger in there. If I go a position up, I get this. Another position up. All right. Now let's see how that sounds if I pick a subdivision and then play against a rhythm. That is a classic. I can take this idea and then maybe make it 6 notes first, and then instead of going and then starting here again, I start on the high note and then come back. So let me show you what I mean. And you continue that same pattern. So here's the first 6. Now do the next 6. Then I start on the high note, descending, and there's my next 6. Very interesting sound, rhythmically. 1, 2, 3, 4. Very different to the other one, which is just this. Always starting on the low note, right? But with the other example, I'm switching low, high. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, 4. Alright, so now I'll compare both. So here's the first one. I'll do the other one. 3, 4. Alright? As you can hear, the accent is always different on the second variation. But mechanically, it's not that different. You just have to watch the picking. On that last example, I was doing partial picking, so I was legatoing certain notes. And you decide after a while when you do that, because if you practice both ways, one time picking and then one time legato, later you can choose which one you prefer, and you never lose the timing or the synchronization, which is very important. The biggest problem that I see is people just go to legato right away because they say, oh, I can play that faster. But it doesn't mean you'll play it in time. Okay, so always make sure that you can do it both ways. One time picking, one time legato. I have to admit that you can go legato much faster, and that's usually the tendency, right? We are guilty of that. But that's a choice you have to make later. So let me jam a little bit more, and next week I'll show you more licks. There are 3-note per string, and it's going to be lots of fun. So this is it for today, and I'll see you next week for more 3-note per string stuff.